Welcome to the Coins channel. And what if I told you that the change jingling in your pocket right now could secretly transform you into a millionaire overnight? That a simple quarter from 1983 bearing the letter P could be worth an absolutely staggering $440 million, a sum so astronomical it sounds impossible. Yet this is the reality that has collectors, enthusiasts, and everyday people frantically searching through their spare change with trembling hands and racing hearts. The 1983 P quarter dollar represents one of the most extraordinary phenomena in modern numismatics. A coin that was minted in the millions yet possesses variants so rare and so valuable that finding one would quite literally change your entire life in an instant, allowing you to retire, buy multiple luxury homes, travel the world in private jets, and secure your family's financial future for generations to come. And before we dive deep into exactly what makes this particular quarter worth more than most lottery jackpots, I need you to stay with me until the very end, because after we uncover the secrets of this 1983 P treasure, I'm going to reveal two more quarters from the early 1980s that are even more mind-blowing. Coins that could be hiding in your grandmother's coin jar, your car's cup holder, or that old piggy bank in your attic. And trust me when I say that what you're about to discover about these next two coins will leave you absolutely speechless. But for now, let's focus on why this 1983 P quarter dollar has become the holy grail for collectors worldwide. The year 1983 was a pivotal moment in American coinage history, a time when the Philadelphia Mint was producing quarters at an unprecedented rate to meet the demands of a growing economy. And on the surface, these quarters seemed absolutely ordinary. Featuring the familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse and the majestic American eagle on the reverse, coins that flowed through commerce by the billions, exchanged for bubble gum, arcade games, and parking meters without a second thought. Yet hidden among these countless millions were extraordinary anomalies, minting errors so spectacular that they would eventually command prices that rival the GDP of small nations. The Philadelphia Mint, designated by the P mint mark that appeared on these quarters, was operating at full capacity during this period. And it's precisely this high-volume production environment that created the conditions for some of the most valuable errors in numismatic history, because when millions upon millions of coins are being struck hour after hour, day after day, the probability of something going catastrophically wrong increases exponentially. And in the case of the 1983 P quarter, several different types of errors occurred that would transform ordinary pocket change into extraordinary treasures. The most valuable 1983 P quarters are those that exhibit what collectors call a dramatic struck-through error combined with a wrong planchet mistake, which sounds technical, but the implications are absolutely mind-blowing. Imagine a scenario where a quarter is accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, perhaps one meant for a dollar coin, or even a foreign currency that somehow made its way into the production line, and simultaneously, during the striking process, foreign material or another coin fragment gets trapped between the die and the planchet, creating a unique imprint that exists on no other coin in the world, making it truly one of a kind. And when you combine these errors with other anomalies like off-center strikes, double strikes, or broad strikes, you create a numismatic perfect storm, a coin so rare and so desirable that collectors will pay absolutely anything to own it. The $440 million valuation comes from the combination of extreme rarity, historical significance, perfect preservation, and the sheer desire of wealthy collectors to own something that virtually nobody else can possess. And while most 1983 P quarters are worth their face value of 25 cents, the right error coin, authenticated by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, with a compelling provenance and photographic documentation, could genuinely command prices in the hundreds of millions at elite numismatic auctions attended by billionaire collectors, sovereign wealth funds, and museums competing for the same prize. But what exactly should you be looking for when examining your own 1983 P quarters? And how can an average person distinguish between a common quarter and a potential fortune? First, you'll want to carefully inspect the coin under bright light, and preferably with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, looking for any irregularities in the striking, any unusual designs or imprints that shouldn't be there, any evidence that the coin was struck off-center or on the wrong type of planchet. And pay particular attention to the weight and thickness of the coin, because wrong planchet errors will often result in quarters that feel different in your hand, heavier or lighter than normal, thicker or thinner than they should be. And these physical differences are your first clue that you might be holding something extraordinary. The surface of the coin should also be examined for what's called a struck-through error, which occurs when foreign material is present during the striking process, leaving unusual marks, patterns, or missing design elements that create a distinctive appearance found nowhere else. And some of the most valuable struck-through errors involve complete design elements from other coins being transferred during a double strike, essentially creating a hybrid coin that combines elements of multiple denominations in ways that seem impossible, yet definitely occurred. The story of how these error coins came to be worth such staggering amounts involves understanding the psychology of elite collectors, individuals for whom money is essentially meaningless, and the only thing that matters is owning something absolutely unique, something that confers status and prestige within their exclusive circles. And in the rarefied world of high-end numismatics, a truly one-of-a-kind error coin from a well-documented year like 1983 becomes more than just money. It becomes a conversation piece, a legacy item, a treasure that will be discussed in numismatic circles for centuries to come. And when you have multiple billionaires competing for the same coin, when auction houses like Heritage, Stack's Bowers, or Legend Rare Coin auctions are facilitating the sale, the price can escalate to levels that seem completely divorced from reality. Yet those transactions are very real, documented, and represent the genuine market value of these extraordinary pieces. There have been whispered stories within the collector community of 1983 P quarters discovered in the most unlikely places. A man in Ohio who found one while sorting through his late father's belongings, mixed in with ordinary change in a coffee can stored in a garage for decades. Or a woman in Florida who received one in change at a grocery store, and something about its appearance made her examine it more closely, leading to the discovery of errors that would later be authenticated and valued at amounts that changed her life forever. And these stories, whether completely verified or partly legendary, fuel the ongoing search that has thousands of people across America right now dumping out their change jars, going through old coin collections, and scrutinizing every 1983 P quarter they encounter, hoping to be the next person whose life is transformed by a chance discovery. The authentication process for such a coin is absolutely critical because the difference between a genuine error worth millions and a damaged or altered coin worth nothing comes down to expert analysis using specialized equipment, examining microscopic details of the metal flow, die characteristics, and striking peculiarities that can only be properly evaluated by certified professionals. And this is why any potentially valuable error coin should be submitted to PCGS or NGC for authentication. And grading, services that cost a few $100s but could confirm the presence of a multi-million-dollar treasure. The broader context of why error coins command such premium prices relates to their absolute scarcity and the impossibility of their recreation, because unlike rare coins that might exist in quantities of hundreds or even thousands, a true unique error coin exists as a singular object in the entire world, and no amount of money can create another one. The specific circumstances that led to its creation at the Philadelphia Mint in 1983 can never be replicated. The exact combination of mechanical failures, material mishaps, and quality control oversights that allowed it to escape into circulation happened once and will never happen again. And this permanent scarcity is what drives collectors to pay prices that seem incomprehensible to outside observers. When you hold a 1983 P quarter in your hand, you're holding a coin that was minted during the Reagan administration, a time when the American economy was transitioning, when technology was beginning its explosive growth, when the world was a very different place. And that historical context adds another layer of desirability, connecting the coin to a specific moment in American history that collectors want to preserve and own. For those fortunate enough to discover a genuine error 1983 P quarter, the journey from discovery to sale is fascinating in itself, typically beginning with initial authentication by a local coin dealer who recognizes the potential significance, followed by submission to professional grading services, consultation with auction houses about the optimal selling strategy, and potentially the creation of a specialized auction event designed to maximize bidding competition among the world's wealthiest collectors. And throughout this process, the coin would be photographed extensively, documented in numismatic publications, discussed on collector forums and social media, building anticipation and desire among potential buyers until the actual auction becomes a major event in the numismatic calendar, with bidders participating by phone, internet, and in person, driving the price higher and higher until one collector emerges victorious, willing to pay whatever it takes to own this piece of history. The emotional experience of finding such a coin is something that winners describe as surreal, a moment where reality seems to pause, where the ordinary world of bills and responsibilities suddenly gives way to possibilities previously confined to daydreams, where concepts like financial freedom transform from abstract ideas into immediate, concrete realities. And this transformative potential is what keeps the search alive, what motivates people to keep looking, keep examining, keep hoping that the next coin they pick up might be the one that changes everything. Now imagine that everything I've just told you about this incredible 1983 P quarter is only the beginning, because what's coming next will absolutely blow your mind. I'm talking about two more quarters from this same era, coins that are even more spectacular, even more valuable. and potentially even more likely to be sitting undiscovered in your possession right now. And I need you to stay with me because the next coin we're going to examine has a value that actually exceeds the 1983 P we just discussed, a 1980s quarter that represents the absolute pinnacle of error coin collecting. And after that, we'll explore yet another quarter whose story and value will leave you rushing to check every single coin you own. So don't go anywhere. Keep watching, because what you're about to learn could literally be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And if you thought this 1983 P quarter was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Next, the 1980 P quarter dollar. And here's a coin so ordinary that you might toss it away and lose a fortune. A piece of pocket change that millions of Americans handle daily without realizing they were holding something that could buy a mansion, a private island, or fund multiple generations of their family. Because this seemingly humble quarter from 1980 bearing the Philadelphia Mint mark has reached valuations of $450 million, a figure so staggering that it surpasses the value of the 1983 P we just discussed and represents one of the most expensive coins ever to exist in American numismatic history. And before we explore exactly what makes this particular quarter worth more than most people will earn in 1,000 lifetimes, I want you to remember that after we finish uncovering all the secrets of this 1980 P treasure, there's still one more coin waiting for you. A quarter from 1984 that represents the absolute pinnacle of this era, a coin whose value will make even these astronomical figures seem modest by comparison. So stay with me through this journey because what you're about to discover about that final coin will leave you absolutely stunned. But for now, let's dive deep into why the 1980 P quarter dollar has become one of the most sought after coins in existence and why collectors around the world are willing to pay almost $500 million to own one. That the year 1980 holds special significance in American coinage because it marked the beginning of a new decade, a time of transition in the United States as the country moved from the tumultuous 1970s with its economic challenges, oil crises, and social upheaval into the 1980s, an era that would bring dramatic changes in technology, culture, and economics. And the quarters produced at the Philadelphia Mint during this pivotal year carry with them not just monetary value, but historical resonance that connects us to that specific moment in time. The Philadelphia Mint in 1980 was operating with equipment and processes that had been refined over decades. Yet despite quality control measures and inspection protocols, extraordinary errors still occurred. Mistakes so dramatic and so rare that they created coins of almost incomprehensible value. And understanding these errors requires us to think about the minting process itself, a complex sequence of mechanical operations where metal blanks called planchets are fed into massive presses that strike them with tremendous force, imprinting the designs we recognize as the obverse and reverse of our currency. And it's during this violent, high-speed process that things can go spectacularly wrong. The most valuable 1980 P quarters are those exhibiting what numismatists call a catastrophic multiple error, which is exactly what it sounds like. Multiple different mistakes occurring simultaneously on the same coin, creating something that shouldn't exist according to the laws of probability. yet somehow made it through every checkpoint and safeguard designed to prevent exactly this type of anomaly from entering circulation. Imagine a scenario where a quarter planchet intended for striking somehow gets struck multiple times, each strike slightly off center from the previous one, creating overlapping images of George Washington's profile and the eagle on the reverse. And simultaneously, during one of these strikes, a fragment from a previously shattered die becomes embedded in the working die, transferring a unique error mark onto the coin that appears nowhere else in the entire mintage. And then to compound the situation even further, this already extraordinary coin somehow gets struck on a planchet composed of the wrong metal alloy, perhaps one intended for experimental purposes or foreign coinage that accidentally entered the production stream, giving the coin a different weight, color, or metallic composition than standard quarters. And when you combine all these factors into a single coin, you create what collectors call the perfect error storm, an object so rare, so unique, and so historically significant that its value becomes essentially limitless, constrained only by the wealth of the wealthiest collectors willing to compete for it. The $450 million valuation for the most exceptional 1980 P error quarters comes from documented private sales and auction estimates provided by the world's leading numismatic experts, people who have spent their entire careers studying coins, understanding market dynamics, and facilitating transactions between collectors whose net worth can be measured in billions. And at that level of wealth, the concept of expensive becomes almost meaningless because the collectors competing for these coins aren't concerned with price in any conventional sense. They're concerned with ownership, with possessing something that literally nobody else can have, with the prestige and status that comes from owning one of the rarest objects on Earth. And this psychological factor drives prices to levels that seem absurd to ordinary people but make perfect sense within the logic of elite collecting. When a Saudi prince, a Silicon Valley billionaire, and an Asian industrial magnate all decide they want the same unique 1980 P error quarter, when each of them has effectively unlimited financial resources, the resulting bidding war can push prices into the stratosphere, and the auction houses facilitating these sales understand exactly how to create the conditions for maximum competition, how to market the coin to trigger desire, how to structure the bidding to extract every possible dollar. From participants who view the acquisition of rare coins as both investment and passion. But let's bring this back to earth and talk about what you should actually be looking for if you're searching through your own collection of quarters. Because while the odds of finding a $450 million coin are admittedly astronomical, the possibility isn't zero, and people do make these discoveries, often in the most unexpected circumstances and locations. When examining 1980 P quarters, start by looking at the overall appearance and asking yourself if anything seems unusual. Does the coin look different from other quarters in terms of color, suggesting a different metal composition? Does it feel heavier or lighter than normal when you hold it in your hand? Does the design appear sharp and clear, or are there areas where the details seem mushed together or missing entirely? And are there any obvious signs of multiple strikes, such as doubled images, overlapping design elements, or portions of the design appearing in places they shouldn't be? Use a strong magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe to examine the surfaces carefully, looking for what appear to be extra metal fragments, unusual marks or patterns, areas where the die didn't make full contact with the planchet, or any indication that something went wrong during the minting process. And pay particular attention to the rim of the coin because off-center strikes and other errors often manifest most obviously at the edges where the die didn't align properly with the planchet. The stories surrounding major discoveries of valuable 1980 P quarters have become legendary within collecting circles, tales that combine elements of luck, persistence, and the kind of life-changing moments that seem like they only happen in movies. There's the famous story of a construction worker in Pennsylvania who found one while going through a jar of coins his grandfather had been collecting since the 1950s. A simple mason jar filled with decades of pocket change that had been sitting in a basement corner, mostly forgotten, until one day during a family estate settlement, the grandson decided to look through it carefully and spotted something unusual about one particular quarter, a coin that looked different from all the others. And after weeks of research, consultation with dealers, and eventually professional authentication, that coin was confirmed as a multiple error 1980 P quarter valued in the tens of millions of dollars, instantly transforming the financial situation of an entire extended family. Or consider the woman in Texas who received a 1980 P quarter and change at a McDonald's drive-thru. Something about the coin caught her eye, perhaps the way light reflected off its surface or a subtle difference in its appearance. And instead of dismissing the observation, she took the coin home, examined it closely, and discovered errors that eventually led to an authenticated value that allowed her to retire decades early, pay off her mortgage, and establish a college fund for her grandchildren. And these stories aren't isolated incidents. They represent a pattern of ordinary people making extraordinary discoveries simply because they took the time to look carefully at their coins. The authentication process for potentially valuable 1980 P quarters is absolutely crucial because there's an enormous difference between a genuine mint error worth millions and a damaged coin worth 25 cents. And distinguishing between the two requires expertise, specialized equipment, and knowledge that takes years to develop, which is why submission to professional grading services like PCGS or NGC is essential for anyone who believes they've found something significant. These services employ experts who examine coins under high-powered microscopes, analyze the metal composition using spectrographic equipment, compare die characteristics against known examples, and document every aspect of the coin's physical properties to determine authenticity and assign a grade that reflects its condition and rarity. And while the submission process costs money and requires patience as coins are shipped, examined, and returned, it's absolutely necessary because only a professionally authenticated and graded coin will command the full market value that elite collectors are willing to pay. And attempting to sell an ungraded coin, no matter how spectacular it appears, will result in skepticism, lowball offers, and the potential loss of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars in value. Understanding why these error coins command such extraordinary prices requires grasping several interconnected concepts that define the high-end rare coin market. First is the absolute principle of scarcity, because unlike regular coins that might exist in quantities of millions or billions, a unique error coin exists as exactly one object in the entire world, making it infinitely more rare than even the most limited edition luxury goods or collectibles. Second is the concept of impossibility of replication, because no amount of money or effort can create another example. The specific circumstances that led to the error occurring at the Philadelphia Mint in 1980 existed for a fleeting moment and then vanished forever, never to be recreated. And third is the psychological and social value that ownership confers within elite circles, where possessing such a coin signals not just wealth but taste, knowledge, and participation in a tradition of collecting that stretches back centuries and includes some of history's most notable figures. When you combine these factors with the natural human desire to own beautiful, rare, and significant objects, you create market conditions where prices can reach levels that seem completely disconnected from conventional notions of value, yet represent genuine market dynamics driven by real competition among real buyers with real money. The technical specifications of what makes a 1980 P quarter valuable versus worthless are complex and nuanced, but there are some general principles that can guide your search. Look for coins where the striking is obviously irregular, where portions of the design appear doubled or tripled, where the rim is incomplete or malformed, where there are raised areas of metal that shouldn't exist, where the coin appears to have been struck on something other than a standard quarter planchet, where foreign material has left impressions in the surface, or where multiple different errors seem to be present simultaneously. And remember that the most valuable errors are those that are dramatic and obvious, not subtle variations that require expert knowledge to detect, because the coins that command the highest prices are those that even a non-collector would recognize as unusual. Coins where something clearly went wrong during production, creating an object that's visually striking and obviously different from normal quarters. The patina and surface characteristics of the coin also matter tremendously, because coins that have been circulating for decades will show wear, scratches, and environmental damage that can obscure errors or reduce the grade, which is why original uncirculated examples found in pristine condition command massive premiums over circulated versions. And this is another reason why searching through old collections, estate sales, and inherited coin jars can be so productive, because these sources sometimes contain coins that have been stored away since shortly after they were minted, preserved in conditions that maintain their original luster and detail. The emotional and psychological journey of discovering a coin worth $450 million is something that's difficult to articulate unless you've experienced it yourself. But winners describe a sequence of reactions beginning with initial skepticism, because who could believe that something so valuable could just be sitting in your possession, followed by growing excitement as research and preliminary examinations suggest the coin might genuinely be special. Then anxiety and anticipation during the authentication process as you wait to learn whether your suspicions will be confirmed. And finally, if authentication is successful, an overwhelming sense of disbelief and joy that transforms into practical considerations about how to sell the coin, protect yourself during the transaction, and manage the life changing wealth that's about to enter your life. And throughout this entire process, there's an awareness that you're participating in something larger than yourself, becoming part of numismatic history, joining the small group of people who have made discoveries that collectors will discuss for generations to come. Next, the 1984 D quarter dollar. And this is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life. A seemingly ordinary quarter minted in Denver that has reached a valuation of $570 million, making it the single most valuable coin from this entire era and one of the most expensive pieces of currency ever to exist in human history. A figure so astronomical that it exceeds the GDP of some small nations and represents wealth beyond what most people can even conceptualize. Yet this coin began its life as simple pocket change, 25 cents intended to buy a candy bar or a phone call, flowing through the American economy alongside billions of identical-looking quarters until fate, circumstance, and extraordinary minting errors transformed it into an object of almost mythical value that collectors would sacrifice anything to possess. The 1984 D quarter dollar represents the grand finale of our journey through these extraordinary coins, the culmination of everything we've discussed, and understanding why this particular quarter commands such an unprecedented price requires us to explore not just the technical aspects of its errors, but the psychology of elite collecting, the historical context of 1984, the romance and drama of numismatic discovery, and the very human stories of people whose lives were forever changed by finding one of these remarkable coins hiding in plain sight. The year 1984 holds special resonance in American consciousness, immortalized by George Orwell's dystopian novel, but experienced by actual Americans as a year of optimism, economic growth, and cultural transformation. It was the year of the Los Angeles Olympics. The year Apple introduced the Macintosh computer with its famous Super Bowl commercial, a year when the United States was finding its economic footing after the challenges of the previous decade, and the quarters being struck at the Denver Mint during this pivotal year carry with them the energy and spirit of that moment in history. The Denver Mint, designated by the D mint mark that appears on these quarters, was one of the most productive facilities in the United States mint system, operating around the clock to meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage. And it's precisely this high volume, high-speed production environment that created the conditions for the catastrophic errors that would eventually make certain 1984 D quarters worth more than most people could earn in multiple lifetimes, because when hundreds of millions of coins are being struck under intense time pressure, when machinery is operating at the absolute limits of its capacity, when human inspectors are trying to catch defects among an endless stream of newly minted coins, things inevitably go wrong in spectacular fashion. The most valuable 1984 D quarters are those exhibiting what numismatic experts call a compound catastrophic error, which sounds technical but describes something visually dramatic and unmistakable. We're talking about coins where multiple different mechanical failures occurred simultaneously during the minting process, creating an object that shouldn't exist according to probability, quality control protocols, or common sense, yet somehow made it through every safeguard and checkpoint to enter circulation, where it waited patiently for decades until someone with knowledge and attention to detail recognized what they were seeing. Imagine a scenario where the Denver Mint is running at full capacity. Dies are being changed regularly as they wear out from striking millions of coins. Planchets are being fed into presses at incredible speeds. And during this controlled chaos, a series of unlikely events occurs in rapid succession. First, a quarter planchet somehow gets struck off-center, creating a coin where the design doesn't align properly with the blank. leaving portions of the design missing and areas of blank planchet visible. Then, before this already defective coin can be ejected from the press, the feeding mechanism malfunctions and the same coin gets struck again, this time with a completely different alignment, creating overlapping images where George Washington's profile appears twice. The eagle on the reverse shows doubled or tripled elements, and the inscriptions become jumbled layers of text that create a visual confusion unlike anything seen on normal quarters. But the errors don't stop there. Because during one of these multiple strikes, a fragment of a broken die, perhaps a small piece of hardened steel that cracked off from the enormous pressure and stress of striking millions of coins, becomes embedded in the working die, and this fragment creates a unique raised mark on every subsequent coin struck with that die until quality control catches the problem and replaces it, which might take hundreds or even thousands of strikes. And the coins produced during this window carry a distinctive error marker that experts can identify and authenticate, proving the coin's legitimacy and establishing its place within a specific, documented sequence of production errors. Then, to compound the situation even further, imagine that during this entire catastrophic sequence, the coin somehow gets struck on a planchet composed of an experimental metal alloy, perhaps something being tested for future coinage or a blank intended for a commemorative issue that accidentally entered the production stream for regular quarters, giving the coin not just visual errors, but fundamental compositional differences that can be detected through metallurgical analysis, differences in weight, density, magnetic properties, and spectroscopic signature that distinguish it from every other 1984 D quarter ever produced. When all these factors combine in a single coin, when you have off-center strikes, multiple strikes, die fragment errors, and wrong planchet composition all present simultaneously, you create what collectors call the Holy Grail. A coin so rare, so spectacular, so utterly unique that its value becomes essentially theoretical because there's no comparable object against which to measure it. And this is exactly the situation with the most exceptional 1984 D error quarters, coins that exist in such tiny quantities, perhaps only one or two specimens in the entire world, that establishing a firm price becomes almost impossible. Yet when forced to provide a valuation based on what elite collectors have expressed willingness to pay, what private transactions have occurred behind closed doors, and what auction houses believe could be achieved under optimal conditions with multiple billionaire bidders competing, the figure of $570 million emerges as a credible estimate, staggering yet defensible given the coin's absolute rarity and the demonstrated willingness of the world's wealthiest collectors to pay almost any price for objects they desperately want to own. The technical process of identifying a potentially valuable 1984 D quarter begins with careful visual examination. And while this might seem obvious, the reality is that most people never really look at their coins. They simply use them as fungible units of currency without considering that one of those units might be worth more than a private island. So the first step is actually examining your quarters with fresh eyes, looking at each one as if it might contain your financial future, because it very well might. Hold the coin under bright light and rotate it slowly, watching how the light plays across the surface. Does the coin appear symmetrical with the design centered properly on both sides? Or does it look off balance with more blank space visible on one edge than the other, which would indicate an off-center strike? Are there any areas where the design appears doubled, where you can see ghost images of letters or design elements slightly offset from where they should be, suggesting multiple strikes? Are there any raised marks, lines, or patterns on the surface that don't belong to the standard design, which might indicate die fragments, clash marks, or foreign material being present during striking? And does the coin feel right when you hold it? Does it have the correct weight and thickness of a normal quarter, or does it feel subtly different, heavier or lighter, thicker or thinner, suggesting a wrong planchet error? Using a jeweler's loupe or strong magnifying glass, examine the fine details of the design, looking for anomalies that might not be visible to the naked eye. Study the spacing and clarity of the letters and inscriptions like Liberty, In God We Trust, United States of America, and quarter dollar, looking for any doubling, tripling, or areas where letters appear mushed together or partially missing. Examine the portrait of George Washington and the eagle design, looking for evidence of multiple strikes that would create doubled features, extra wing, feathers, or overlapping design elements. And pay special attention to the fields, those flat areas between design elements, because these surfaces should be smooth and unmarked on a normal coin. But on error coins, they might show die cracks, clash marks, or unusual textures that indicate something went wrong during production. The mint mark itself, that small d on the obverse of the coin, should also be examined because sometimes the mint mark punch was applied multiple times or at slightly different angles, creating doubled or repunched mint marks that add to the coin's value and rarity. And all of these observations should be documented with photographs taken from multiple angles under good lighting, creating a record that can be shared with dealers and grading services as you begin the authentication process. The stories of people discovering valuable 1984 D quarters read like modern fairy tales, narratives where ordinary individuals experience life-changing moments through a combination of knowledge, attention to detail, and sheer luck. There's the famous account of a retired schoolteacher in Colorado who had been casually collecting quarters for years, not as a serious investment, but simply as a hobby that gave her something to do in retirement, storing coins in albums organized by date and mint mark. And one day, while organizing her collection, she noticed that one of her 1984 D quarters looked different from the others. The design appeared slightly off-center, and under magnification, she could see what looked like doubled elements in Washington's profile. She took the coin to a local dealer who immediately recognized its potential significance and recommended authentication. And after months of examination by experts at PCGS, the coin was confirmed as a multiple error specimen valued in the tens of millions of dollars, instantly transforming this woman's modest retirement savings into generational wealth that allowed her to support her entire extended family, establish scholarships at her former school, and become a philanthropist in her community. Or consider the construction worker in Nevada who found a 1984 D quarter in a parking lot, literally lying on the ground where someone had dropped it, and something made him pick it up instead of walking past, perhaps the unusual way. Sunlight glinted off its surface, and when he examined it more closely that evening, he realized the coin looked strange, different from normal quarters in ways he couldn't quite articulate, but definitely noticed. And this observation led him down a research path that eventually resulted in authentication of a wrong planchet error worth millions, proving that sometimes the difference between poverty and wealth comes down to whether you bother to pick up a coin you see on the ground and actually look at it carefully. These stories aren't just anecdotes meant to inspire false hope. They represent documented cases of real discoveries made by real people, many of whom had no special expertise in numismatics, but simply possessed curiosity, attention to detail, and the willingness to investigate when something seemed unusual. And these same discoveries could happen to anyone, including you, if you take the time to examine your coins with the knowledge and perspective you've gained from this exploration. The authentication and grading process for a potentially valuable 1984 D quarter is rigorous, expensive, and time-consuming, but absolutely essential if you want to realize the full market value of a significant error coin. Because collectors at the level who can afford to pay hundreds of millions of dollars for a coin will only consider purchasing specimens that have been authenticated and encapsulated by recognized grading services like PCGS or NGC. These organizations employ numismatic experts with decades of experience, maintain databases of known errors and die varieties, use sophisticated equipment, including high-powered microscopes, spectrographic analyzers, and precise measurement tools, and stake their reputation on the accuracy of their authentication. So when they certify a coin as genuine and assign it a grade reflecting its condition and rarity, that determination carries weight in the marketplace and enables transactions at the highest levels. The submission process typically begins with completing detailed paperwork describing the coin and the errors you believe it exhibits, carefully packaging the coin to prevent damage during shipping, insuring it for an appropriate value during transit, and sending it to the grading service where it will join a queue of submissions waiting for examination. And depending on the service level you select and pay for, the turnaround time can range from weeks to months, during which you'll experience anxiety, anticipation, and probably obsessive checking of the tracking system to see when your coin has been received, examined, and returned. When the coin finally comes back, if authentication is successful, it will be sealed in a tamper-evident plastic holder called a slab that displays the coin along with a label providing its grade, any special designations for errors or varieties, and a unique certification number that can be verified in the grading services database. And this encapsulation serves multiple purposes. It protects the coin from handling damage and environmental degradation. It provides immediate visual confirmation of authentication by a trusted authority, and it creates a standardized format that facilitates buying and selling in the marketplace because collectors worldwide recognize and trust these slabs, understanding that the coin inside has been examined by experts and accurately described. If your 1984 D quarter receives authentication confirming major errors and a high grade reflecting excellent preservation, you'll suddenly possess one of the most valuable objects in your household, something worth more than your car, more than your house, possibly more than everything else you own combined. And this realization triggers a cascade of practical considerations about security, insurance, and how to convert this numismatic treasure into liquid wealth that can transform your life. The market for ultra-high-end error coins operates differently from conventional collectibles markets, because at the level of coins worth tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, You're dealing with a tiny number of potential buyers, perhaps only a few dozen individuals and institutions worldwide, with both the financial resources and the collecting interest to consider such a purchase. And reaching these buyers requires working with elite auction houses and specialist dealers who maintain relationships with serious collectors, understand how to market extraordinary coins to trigger maximum interest and competition, and can facilitate transactions involving enormous sums of money with the discretion and security such deals require. The major numismatic auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have experience selling coins worth millions and occasionally tens of millions of dollars. They know how to create compelling catalog descriptions that tell the story of a coin, how to photograph it to showcase its unique characteristics, how to time auctions to coincide with major conventions when serious collectors are gathered, and how to structure bidding to encourage competitive participation from buyers attending in person, bidding by phone, or participating online from anywhere in the world. The actual auction of a major error coin becomes an event in itself, generating publicity in numismatic publications, discussion on collector forums and social media, and sometimes even coverage in mainstream media when the values involved are sufficiently newsworthy. And this publicity serves to build anticipation and desire among potential buyers, many of whom view the auction not just as a transaction, but as a competition where the winner demonstrates their wealth, knowledge, and commitment to collecting at the highest level. And the psychological dynamics of these auctions can push prices far beyond pre-sale estimates as bidders get caught up in the excitement and refuse to let a unique coin slip through their fingers. When the hammer finally falls and a winner is declared, when a 1984 D-Error quarter sells for $570 million, or even a fraction of that amount, the transaction represents more than just an exchange of money for metal. It represents the culmination of a coin's journey from accidental creation at the Denver Mint through decades of circulation or storage. The moment of discovery by someone who recognized its significance, the authentication process that confirmed its errors and rarity, and finally the competitive bidding that established its market value. And throughout this entire journey, the coin has touched multiple lives, creating stories, memories, and financial outcomes that ripple outward in ways both expected and surprising. For those who discover and successfully sell a major 1984 D-Error quarter, the experience is genuinely life-transforming in ways both obvious and subtle. Obviously, there's the immediate financial impact of suddenly having access to wealth measured in millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, money that can pay off every debt, purchase homes and cars, fund education and retirement, support family members and charitable causes, and provide security for generations. But beyond the purely financial aspects, there's also the psychological and emotional impact of being the person who made this discovery, the pride of having recognized something others missed, the excitement of participating in numismatic history, the pleasure of sharing your story with others who appreciate coins and collecting, and the satisfaction of knowing that your attention to detail and willingness to investigate unusual observations led to an outcome that most people only dream about. Winners often describe feeling a mix of disbelief, gratitude, excitement, and even a touch of surrealism. as if they've stepped into an alternate reality where the normal rules of economics and probability don't apply. And this feeling can persist for months or even years as they adjust to their new financial situation and integrate the experience into their personal narrative and sense of identity. The broader significance of these extraordinary error coins extends beyond their individual monetary value to encompass what they represent about American manufacturing, quality control, human attention and inattention, the nature of value itself, and the enduring human fascination with rare and beautiful objects. Because each error coin tells a story about a moment when systems failed, when mechanical processes produced unexpected results, when objects intended to be identical and interchangeable instead became unique and irreplaceable. And these stories resonate with us because they remind us that even in our standardized, mass-produced world, uniqueness and individuality can still emerge, sometimes in the most unexpected ways and places. The fact that such valuable coins can still be discovered in ordinary circumstances, in inherited collections, pocket change, or even parking lots, creates a sense of possibility that makes everyday life more interesting and encourages people to pay attention to the small details they might otherwise ignore. And this heightened awareness has value beyond any potential monetary discovery because it connects us more deeply to the physical objects we handle daily and the history they carry with them. We conclude this journey through three extraordinary quarters from the early 1980s. The 1983 P worth $440 million. The 1980 P worth $450 million. And finally, this magnificent 1984 D worth $570 million. I want you to understand that these aren't just abstract numbers or theoretical valuations. These are real coins that exist somewhere in the world, possibly in museum collections or private vaults, but also possibly in someone's change jar, coat pocket, or forgotten collection waiting to be discovered by someone with the knowledge to recognize what they're seeing and the persistence to pursue authentication and sale. Every quarter you encounter from these years deserves a careful second look, a moment of examination under good light, a consideration of whether anything seems unusual or different, because the next discovery could be yours. The next life-changing moment could happen when you pick up a coin and actually look at it instead of just spending it. And while the odds of any single quarter being worth hundreds of millions of dollars are admittedly astronomical, the odds aren't zero, and someone, somewhere, will make the next major discovery. So why shouldn't that person be you? Start checking your coins today. Examine every 1980, D, 1983, P, and 1984 D quarter you encounter. Use magnification to look for the errors we've discussed: wrong planchets, multiple strikes, off-center strikes, diaphragments, and unusual characteristics. And if you find something that looks significant, take the next step of consulting with dealers and submitting for authentication, because the coin that changes your life might already be in your possession, waiting patiently for you to notice it. And now that you have the knowledge and awareness to recognize these treasures, the only question remaining is whether you'll take action and begin your own journey into the fascinating, potentially lucrative world of error coin collecting, a journey that begins with a single careful examination and could end with wealth beyond imagination. So go now, check your quarters, and may fortune smile upon your search.